Hello, everyone. From wherever you're tuning in from today, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We hope you're all doing well and that your family is also doing well. My name is Margaret Kumba, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. So, just a little bit about me. I'm a lawyer by profession. I have a bachelor degree in law and a master's degree in international trade and commercial law, and I work in Dubai. So we have a very interesting topic for you today. Our topic is responding to crime scene in South Sudan and what you need to know. Before we kick off the discussion, I'd also just like to remember the children who were brutally murdered a few weeks ago in Juba. We also remember all those who have lost their lives in a similar way, and also for their families. Yeah, we remember all of you. So, for today's debate and discussion, we have a wonderful array of panelists that who are also specialists in their field, and I think that this will be a very great discussion. Among our panelists, we've got, I'll just do a little biography about each of them, and then before we kick on into the introduction, we'd like to welcome Dr. Melvin Sindani. She's a graduate of Kampala International University, Western Campus, trained in a bachelor, currently doing pathology in Nairobi University at Kenyatta Hospital. She also runs a hospital, St. Irenaeus Medical Services, located in Ngong. Welcome, Doctor. Next in our panel, we have Nyagoa Tutpur. She's an international human rights lawyer working as a researcher with Human Rights Watch. Prior to her current role, she worked with Amnesty International as campaigner on South Sudan, and with the South Sudan Law Society as an advocacy officer. Nyagoa also holds a master's degree in law from Harvard University and a bachelor's degree in law from University of Nairobi. Welcome, Nyagoa. Next on our panel is Ms. Ayen Chol Deng. She's a communication specialist with Overmonitor and She Magazine for 10 years in the field of media. She worked for various print outlets, including Juba Post, Cartoon Monitor, and She Magazine. Ms. Ayan is currently working as an information associate for the UNIMIS SRSG. Prior to that, she worked as the press secretary during the elections and the referendum. Ms. Ayan is a journalist and a writer who has witnessed firsthand trends in the nation and is able to provide political analysis of situations as a professional journalist. Welcome, Ayan. Next, we have Ms. Janet Gary. She's a counselor graduated from Pan-Africa Christian University and also facilitator in training in classical trauma healing. Welcome, Janet. Last but not least, we've got Miss Lucy Poni. She's a media specialist with more than 10 years experience in broadcast, investigative journalism, and editorial management. Lucy is an alumni of 9 months prestigious Atlas Corps Fellowship in the United States, where she worked at Voice of America headquarters in Washington, D.C., learning the best practices and gaining journalistic skills in developing story ideas, interviewing skills, presentation skills, and editing. She has an extensive experience in training, developing, managing director reporters to stories, and has cultivated sources in both Sudan and South Sudan. So as you can see, we've got some really great panelists today for our discussion. So just to get into it, just an introduction about the topic. We said today we'll be speaking about responding to crime scenes in South Sudan and everything that you need to know about that. So a crime scene in any location that may be associated with a committed crime. Crime scenes contain physical evidence that is pertinent to a criminal investigation. This evidence is collected by crime scene investigators and law enforcement. From the crime scene to the courtroom, Forensic science services play a fundamental role in the criminal investigation and prosecution process. This is often restricted, however, to countries with the capacity and resources to develop a crime scene investigation, um, well known as CSI services, and provide forensic expert training to their law enforcement officers. Since the establishment of the Republic of South Sudan as the world's newest state in July 2011, the restoration of internal security and law enforcement has been high on the agenda. In an effort to build and strengthen forensic awareness and basic crime scene investigation capacities in the country, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, alongside the police components of the United Nations mission in South Sudan and the United Nations Development Program, trained South Sudan police officers to crime scene investigation and physical evidence awareness in Juba. It is important of crime scene security to ensure the integrity of potential physical evidence and the responsibilities of law enforcement agents when they first arrive at a crime scene. Particular attention should be paid to the acquisition of techniques and tools required to recognize physical evidence and preserve it at a standard that ensures that the evidence can be used in court proceedings. Um, I will begin with Dr. Melvin, who is a pathologist and first aid. Pathologists often play roles in taking photographs and physical measurements of the scene, identify and collect forensic evidence, and maintain the proper chain of custody of that evidence. Crime scene investigators collect evidence such as fingerprints, footprints, tire tracks, blood and other fluids, hair fibers, and fiber debris. So our first question, Doctor, what is the difference between a pathologist and a forensic pathologist?
So, a pathologist is a doctor who usually examines or studies tissues, body fluids such as urine, blood, sweat, in order to help a physician make a diagnosis. And pathology has various branches, subspecialties, such as anatomic pathology, forensics pathology, neuropathology, clinical pathology. So forensic pathology is a branch of pathology. It's a general branch of pathology. Now, in forensics pathology, you only deal with examination of evidence in a crime scene and collection of evidence in a crime scene. And it also tends to deal with studying of dead bodies, autopsy, to give you the cause of diseases and unexplained deaths or homicides.
All right, sorry about that. I was on mute. Thank you. So the second question, what does a pathologist do at a crime scene? Can pathologists administer first aid?
A pathologist in a crime scene, the main role is to supervise the crime scene area, the procedure of collection of evidences, and the chain of custody, as you have said. Then it also oversees, if there's a body, for example, it oversees what happens to the body, the removal of the corpse, the autopsy, and returning the body to the deceased. If the crime scene for example, it's let's say files or anything, the pathologist oversees the collection of debris, the collection of human items such as clothing, necklaces, ornaments, just various items that might help to know the cause of the crime scene or the factors that led to the specific crime.
All right, well. Do we have many pathologists in South Sudan? And if so, how many and what roles do they play in South Sudan?
According to my knowledge, I don't think we don't have so many pathologists. There's a journal I read some time back. It was a South Sudan medical journal, and it was talking about consultants in Juma dealing with histopathology. Histopathology is also a branch of pathology. It was claiming that they had only two pathologists. There's also there's also a literature review written by Specialist Medical Workforce. It was written in 2012, I think. They were claiming to have four pathologists. So they're not many in South Sudan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's maybe could be a career path for some people who are in studies right now. What challenges do pathologists face when it comes to crime scene investigations? Do you have also any recommendations on moving forward?
The challenges are quite many. We can start with curiosity from spectators. When something has happened, so many people tend to move towards the scene, the area of crime. So they tend to interfere with the evidence that pathologists need to make a correct diagnosis. That is one. Two, probably also the spectators might end up collecting some evidences, stealing like watches or misplacing items or moving objects from one place to another, which might also interfere with the investigation. There's also conflicts with other departments. For example, the police might be trying to secure the area while the pathologists would like to collect every evidence at once instead of doing one thing or the other. So it may bring up conflicts with other departments. Other thing is maybe weather. For example, if there's rain, it might wash off some of the evidence, such as blood or fingerprints. There's also contamination of evidence. And what might be done is one, we should try to educate the public so that if there's any crime in an area, they shouldn't flock in. They should wait for the proper people to come and tell them what to do, so as not to contaminate the crime scene. There's also lack of equipment such as gloves, so we should talk to the government about making those equipments available so as to do our work as it's meant to be done. Then training and educating more people, that might also help.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor, and for your great insights. And we wish you, the best, even with the challenges. But we wish you the best in pathology. Um, we'll speak now to our second panelist, Ms. Janet Gary, and we'll just find out a bit more on the counseling aspect. Ms. Janet, counselors work in confidential settings with individuals who are experiencing personal difficulties and to help them overcome their problems and to make appropriate changes to their lives. Counselors listen to, empathize with, and encourage and help the empowered individuals, help them to empower them. Our first question, how do we overcome grief and trauma during most difficult times? Can you also give us some tips that could also just help in that area?
How to overcome grief, one should share the sorrow and share the memories of the deceased. And we should always allow them, even encourage them to talk about the feeling of the loss. We should always be available to the people that are grieving, and we should offer practical help. It can be either cooking, running errands, and should not offer false comforts. We should always find our words, to choose our words, whatever we're going to say to the people who are grieving. remember that it can take a long time to recover from the major loss.
Hello, everyone. So sorry about that. I think we're facing a bit of network issues. But so what we'll do now, as we wait for Janet to get back on, we'll move on to Ms. Nyagoa. And our questions here will be on the human rights aspects. So the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in 1979, called on states to take in all fields appropriate measures, including legislation, to ensure the full development and advancement of women for the purpose of guaranteeing them the exercise and enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms on the basis of equality with men. The convention further calls on states to modify or abolish existing laws, regulations, customs, and practices which constitute discrimination against women. But it was not until the women's human rights community organized around the issue of violence against women that the international community began to understand that violence against women seriously impairs women's enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. It is important to note that women's rights are human rights. Ms. Nyagoa, first question, what is the difference between women's rights and human rights? What are the important elements to consider when handling cases of human rights violation of the South Sudanese woman?
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Margaret, for these questions. First of all, I'd like to apologize. I've had massive internet connection issues and I'm speaking from a cafe, so this might not be very ideal. Yes, on that question, so like you say, women rights are human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was created ratified, declared in 1945, says that the purpose of the United Nations is to promote human rights without distinction between the genders or between men and women. So, in that regard, given that the core human rights instrument, which is the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, says that there can be no discrimination on rights between the sexes, then by that regard, women rights are human rights and human rights are women rights. Um, so we all so the International Bill of Rights as well, that is which comprises of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights, as well as the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, also have provisions that make it very clear that there can be that women are entitled to the very same rights as their male counterparts. So that is just to emphasize what women rights and human rights, that there is no distinction. So when it comes to violations of women rights of women rights in South Sudan, so a violation of a human rights happens or occurs when the state, when an agent acting on behalf of the state abuses the rights of the person, or when the state fails to intervene to prevent the violation of a right or to ensure justice for the violation of a right. Um, so we have to go a bit back and ask ourselves what are the kind of human rights violations of women in South Sudan that we are documenting or are experiencing. I mean, if we go, let's go as far back as um, let's go as far back as when South Sudan became a state. So in 2011, we had violations of all forms. It could be sexual violence, gender-based violence, discrimination with regard to matrimonial property and other rights, child marriage, early marriage, and other rights that are usually violated through the cultural lens. So all these are violations or abuses that women in South Sudan are having to deal with. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. There's so much noise here. Um, yes. And so, even outside the ambit of conflicts, we continue to see violence and discrimination against women in South Sudan, like I've said, towards matrimonial property inheritance, forced marriage, and child marriage. Um, so, on your question on what things to be that should be borne in mind, it's one, when investigating crimes against women, I believe one that it has to come from a place of understanding, a place of knowledge of one, what are these abuses, what are these violations, and two, are there laws and policies in place to help address them or help redress them? And three, especially with regard to dealing with the victims or the survivors of the abuses and of the violations. How do you deal with survivors and victims of sexual violence, of and other abuses in South Sudan? So aspects of confidentiality, ensuring that the witness or the victim is protected at every stage of the criminal justice system, whether it is at the point where the case is reported or at the point where investigations of the cases begin. So these are very important. There's the aspect of acting in the best interest of the survivor. I know we all come from different backgrounds and different interventions, um, and sometimes our interventions can either be empowering or disempowering towards the victim of the abuse or survivor of the abuse. And it is very important that at every stage, survivors and victims are made to feel as if they are, in charge of that process. Actually, they should be in charge of that process, should be involved, should be consulted at every stage of the investigation, of the reporting, or of the justice process.
Great. Thank you so much. Are police investigators, prosecutors, and judges trained in South
Sorry,
Sudan to
Margaret, did you
interview
have another
women
question,
victims?
or should I just keep going?
Oh, sorry about that. I think it's a mistake. Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. I think we had some connection issues there for a bit. I hope, Nyago, did you finish? Did I interrupt?
Sorry, said that again, Margaret.
Yeah, I wasn't able to hear you. I was wondering if I interrupted or if you had finished your question, answer. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I think there's just a bit of connection issues. Nyagoa, I'll just go on into our second question. I was asking, are police investigators, prosecutors, and judges trained in South Sudan to interview women victims in a respectful and appropriate manner? Why do women get harassed and mistreated by law enforcement, even though they might be the victim?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, like I said, one aspect of dealing with crimes and in general is so the policy actors and the state actors themselves have to be well trained in how they respond to some of these cases. So in South Sudan, there have been capacity building initiatives for as long as, since 2005. There have been capacity building initiatives to strengthen the capacity of the police, of the judiciary, and of the criminal justice system to be able to respond to not only crimes involving women, but also crimes in general. But what we see year in, year out is that there are still great gaps in how authorities handle crimes, especially against women. This could come from a general attitude towards women, in that inequality in South Sudan persists It comes from a point of misogyny, a point of patriarchy, a point of the cultural place of women in South Sudanese society. So this could be one of that. And then the general attitude and laxity that criminal, that people, that actors in the criminal justice system have in general. So I will say in the many cases that I have documented, one, even when a case is reported, the investigation never happens. And even when the investigation starts, it is not effective in any way. I am speaking about the cases that I have witnessed or the cases that I have dealt with. And so there are significant gaps in how the police. I remember there's a case that one of our sisters, Agnes Dawol, wrote about. And this was, I think, back in 2012 or it was before the conflict. And she wrote about it in an article written Sibu Anna Sibu, where she was talking about Leave Me, Leave Me. And the case she highlighted was about a victim of rape who had reported her rape and then was arrested and detained. And even when she was in jail, she was actually sexually abused by police officers, including by inserting objects into her private areas. So this is just one example of how police officers have often acted. But then there could be examples where authorities have stepped in and have overcome. I don't want to be unfair for lack of given the fact that we don't have a huge nationwide survey to say these are the cases that have worked well and these are the cases that haven't worked well. We can see from cases that women activists have raised in this past period over the pandemic, calling on authorities to act on the rape of the 8-year-old girl, on the rape of other women that were raped in Rock City, or in cases that were raised regarding forced marriages. So the case, the way authorities react to a case is, on a case by case basis. It depends how much public pressure and how much public interest has been generated by that case. In some cases that are controversial, including in December 2018, the Bentiu rapes that were reported by Doctors Without Borders, where they said over 150 women had been raped in a period of 2 weeks. What we saw from the government at the top is a complete denial. So if government officials, including the then Minister for Gender, can come out and publicly say this did not happen without going on the ground first to establish the facts and totally dismissing the experiences of those women and of the actors that are responding to these cases, then I think there is a problem. There is a trend there.
All right, thank you. Now, what acts of sexual and gender-based violence are crimes as defined in the Penal Code of South Sudan? Does the Penal Code include separate crimes of sexual violence against children? Are these crimes prosecuted as public or private crimes? What are the elements necessary to offer proof of the commission of this crime? Are there also any of the elements of the crime irrelevant or inappropriate, e.g., requiring proof of use of force? And are the police officers required to take reports of the crime? If yes, do other obstacles limit women's ability to make the reports to the office? That's a bit lengthy, but I hope you captured all of them. Thanks. Welcome. Okay. Um, let's just move on. I think we've just lost someone, connection issues again. So, Ms. Ayan, I'll just move on to you, ask you a few questions on violence against women and patriarchy. So,
Hi.
violence, Violence against women is one of the most widespread violations of human rights. It can include physical, sexual, psychological, and economic abuse, and it cuts across boundaries of age, race, culture, wealth, and geography. This type of violence has far reaching consequences, harming families and communities. Gender based violence not only violates human rights, but also hampers productivity, reduces human capital, and undermines economic growth. Although rates of women exposed to violence vary from one region to the other, statistics indicate that violence against women is a universal phenomenon and women are subjected to different forms of violence both within and outside their homes. Due to the loopholes in criminal legislation, uh, poor, in, poor enforcement of criminal laws and regulations, lack of proper capacity in the criminal justice system, diminishing and discriminatory attitudes among relevant professionals, and lack of sufficient and sustainable dedicated resources in many countries, the justice chain is still failing women victims of violence. This failure results in a high level of cases of violence going unreported and unprosecuted. Ms. Ayan, why are there unequal treatment of women by the law enforcement in South Sudan?
Thank you for this opportunity. Um, I would just like to add on to what Molana Nyagwa had already said, because she already spoke about patriarchy, which is a system where women are excluded and social system where men dominate, just in summary. So I just wanted to add, I don't want to repeat what she said, because she's already talked about the system in South Sudan, the judicial system and the police system. But I just wanted to add that some of the aspects of unequal treatment is a growing hatred towards women because of their earning capacity. Nowadays, the economic situation has really affected men in South Sudan. Since 2013, the salaries of soldiers and police have dramatically reduced, and women actually earning a lot more money than men. So there's a growing hatred towards the earning capacity towards women. There's a jealousy towards the empowerment of women who are usually submissive towards men. So I think this is one of the reasons why there's increased violence towards women as well. But already the situation, the country was already in a patriarchal system where men are dominating everything, and where there's some chauvinism in the police system and in the army system, obviously. So I just wanted to add that there's violence in general in the nation, violence towards women and children, but there's also violence towards men in general. It's a very violent country right now because we're coming out of a war, and we haven't healed our wounds. We haven't sought counseling. We haven't sought solutions to the problems that we've been having after the 21 years of war and the post-traumatic stress. So this is not really my arena. I'm more of a media person. So I just wanted to add, for example, the situation with the slain children. Can I continue?
Yes, keep speaking.
Yes. So I actually got an opportunity to interview the mother of the slain children. And actually, she wasn't treated very well as a woman. She was treated very badly, while the father was treated well, given a cell on his own. And yet she was being a little bit, actually, she was tortured. And they're trying to get the answer out of her. And there's an indication of gender based violence, prejudice towards women, and she was treated very badly, and we had to intervene to help her out. So when women are reporting cases, they're actually more likely to be bullied. If they come and say that they were raped, they're actually to be bullied even more, because the police and the army are not well trained, and they don't even actually they don't have the moral compass, and there's no checks and balances to stop them from taking absolute power. So I think these are some of the aspects. And then also the judicial system. We need to have more representation of women, advocates, more representation of women as judges, more representation of women in the army, in the police, as per 1325, as you said earlier, that this protocol, it stipulates that women are not just the victims of war, but they should actually be peace builders and part of the change. So the more that we have women representation in the government, we have fulfilled our 35% as a minimum, the more that there will be change in the nation, because we are the ones who are, women are the ones who are actually affected, their children are affected, their husbands are affected, and they have a generally different attitude towards the situation, towards the war, and towards peace building. So that was just the comments that I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. You know, you actually highlighted quite a few interesting things. Maybe I'll just direct this question to you, since you're already speaking about it. Why does the law enforcement use force on women in order to collect evidence? And what do you think should be done to abolish this method?
Well, basically, I think that the law enforcement use force against women because they're bullying women. They're using women as a soft target. Men in South Sudan are actually getting away with literally murder. Like even the accused right now, it took a long time to find out who is the accused who killed the slain children, the three children, and it turns out to be the alleged killer was the uncle, and to get him to be apprehended was an issue. And then maybe most of these men have how do I call it, like a godfather. So we're in a country where everybody has a godfather, everybody has people in the police, everybody has people in the army, and there's always someone to bail them out of the issue. So there's so much nepotism. People don't realize that nepotism is actually very dangerous. Tribalism is very, very dangerous. Actually, people must be persecuted for the crime that they committed, no matter who they're related to and no matter what tribe they're from. There should be due process for everybody. And I think this is the main issue, the lack of due process. But basically, there's a culture that has developed and has become worse, the culture of bullying. Actually, men bully each other in South Sudan. As you see, there's violence everywhere. But now people are looking for soft targets, and women are tough, soft targets right now. But women need to stand together in every issue. Wherever there's a rape, women should stand together. Whenever there's violence against women, whenever there's molestation, whenever there's killing of women and children, women need to be the safeguarders of this peace and safeguarders of other women. The good thing that I wanted to mention is that I appreciate the efforts of the media, even though media have been targets of violence themselves. In the last 10 years, media have been targets and they've been even killed in some stages. But right now, media are the ones who are revealing the cases that are happening, revealing the cases of rape, revealing the cases of killings and murders and violence against men and women. And I also like to commend the society for the small change that is happening, because right now it's less taboo for someone to, I think it's because it's out of control. Girls nowadays talk about being molested and raped. In the past, it was such a big taboo. If somebody was raped, maybe they'll let them get married to the person, or maybe it would be covered up. But I can see that in 2020, there's a change in this nation. We're part of the change in the world. And I believe that now people are willing to be more open. We thank the media for their efforts and risking their lives so that they can tell the truth. And we appreciate every brave person who's come out to tell their stories, all the brave law enforcement who do the right things, all you brave lawyers and doctors who also participate in the due process. Thank you.
Thank you very much and very well said. Thanks a lot also for bringing up the aspects about the media. So I'll direct my question now to Ms. Poni on the roles of journalists during crime scenes. So the trauma that sexual assault and rape inflicts on victims, as well as the stigma still associated with the crime, makes reporting on victims of sexual violence especially daunting. It is important for reporters and editors to understand that sexual assault is not a crime about sex, but about excuse me, but about violence, power, and control. Journalists should avoid reporting details about the assault in ways that imply the victim's behavior caused the danger. So the question here, Ms. Pony, is are the ethics that guide journalists when Sorry, are there ethics that guide journalists when reporting on cases during crime scenes?
Yeah, so thank you very much. I don't know whether you can hear me, but I'm really having a hard time with the internet, so I've not even been following the discussion. But yes, we have ethics that guide journalists, in reporting everything and crime included. And those ethics, the core values of journalism, which include accuracy, independence, impartiality, accountability, integrity, sensitivity, especially to issues that are very sensitive. Crime cases, for example, are not just
Okay, I think we lost Pony there for a bit, so we'll allow her to reconnect. She mentioned that her internet was not very stable, so we'll allow her to reconnect just to finish on the question that she was trying to answer. Um, Let me redirect to you, Janet, because
sorry, I think I just keep going on and off. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're back on, Janet. So let's go back to you. Oh, sorry, Pony, we're back to you. We can proceed. This internet, I think we all understand the difficulties that internet can bring. So let me allow us to let's let her log back in, and then we'll give her a chance later on. Ms. Janet Gary, you'd kind of dropped off a while back. I had a question to you just about counseling. Yeah. Often in our South Sudanese communities, people tend to complain that we're dying inside because of lack of confidence and trust to speak to people who can help us overcome psychological, mental, and social challenges. Why do you think this statement is of concern, and should it be taken seriously?
First of all, I'll talk about stigma, especially stigma towards victims. Who are people pinpointing fingers at victims consider him or herself social meek and people living with denial. Most people assume that they are okay, but mentally they're not okay. And they don't want to go for medical assistance. And lack of confidentiality between counselor and the client. Some people will look like but especially the first sessions will be hard, especially building a rapport with the clients. They'll wonder now, where should I see this person and I don't know them, and it will be hard for them to talk. And lack of ignorance of knowing that there are counselors to help. They cannot acknowledge to come to a counselor, and lack of qualified counselors, especially in our country. We do not have qualified counselors, and it is discouraging to find out that we are not many in the field. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. I think also, having said that, how do we overcome? I think we didn't have an opportunity to hear this earlier about what roles should the community play to support a grieving family, especially with the examples of the three children who were murdered in Juba. What support do you think the parents need the most?
Uh, I'll talk about offer words of encouragement. We should call in and we should check on them on regular basis. You should stand there as a community, physically, mentally, emotionally, with the parents. I know it will be hard for them losing their three kids at the same time. It will be hard for them. And as a community, we should also call for a pastor from the local church to support the family with the words of God, and the church also to call the women to support the mother. I heard that she was not treated right, so the women should support the mother of the children, and also send something to them. This may include foodstuff and also contribute money to the family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe then you could also just tell us if there are any tips, for someone who's going through grief and trauma. Are there any tips that you would want to tell them? Hello, Janet. I think you're still on mute, so weren't able to hear you.
For the tips of, I would recommend everybody to see a counselor. It's not a bad thing to go for therapy, especially it's recommended even for us psychologists and counselors and mental health. We all need sessions, and I recommend for sessions to everyone. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Miss Nyagoa, I think we'll direct this question to you. If you. I think we've lost Nyagoa as well.
I'm here.
Welcome back, Nyagoa. I thought I'd just ask you, just to bring back the conversation to you. I wanted to ask if what roles should women lawyers, women judges, and women prosecutors play in South Sudan to help other women?
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks for that question. I think when I'll start with the fact that we, the people in this forum, we are all privileged one way or another. Privileged either in terms of our educational background, professional background, earning power, like Madam Ayon Achol Deng says, or in terms of where we are in society. So obviously, we do have important roles to play in order to advance the progress and rights of women and girls in South Sudan. So it starts from a point of one. A lot of us here on this panel and in so many other platforms have been standing in the gap in terms of advocacy, ensuring that you're raising awareness for the general population in South Sudan. Because I tend to say that it is not an absence of statutory law to advance the rights of women, but also it's the fact that there are cultural attitudes towards women that need to be changed and reformed in South Sudan. So one, there's a point of awareness raising, providing evidence as well as support to other women and girls that need that kind of support. There's also the fact that women need to be better involved in positions of power and positions of influence, places where we can be able to shape policy as well as government response. So where there are women in government or there are women in parliament, in the judiciary, there is the need for them to advance the rights and issues around that affect women and girls. Yes, in terms of women lawyers, women judges, and women prosecutors, I think that has to be one. I don't know how many women lawyers, judges, and prosecutors there are, So I think there should be a mapping in general for us to identify what are the numbers and where are they located and what areas of law or what areas of the criminal justice system or the judiciary that they are involved in. I think such a mapping would be helpful in terms of shaping how lawyers and prosecutors and judges can respond. With regard to lawyers, I think they have more leeway in selecting what cases to advance. They would, cases, maybe having more female lawyers advance cases around gender-based violence and other crimes against women, and even not that, but taking on constitutional challenges. For instance, we've had this law in the penal code for a very long time that outlaws, that makes it, that basically says it is, that does not outlaw rape between spouses, between married people. And a problem often arises where, given this issue around forced and early marriages in South Sudan, so rape in the penal code is defined as so intercourse without consent, and raping under the age of 18 is defilement. Now, in the terms when it comes to spouses, where culture, our cultural practices enable it for older men to marry younger women below the age of 18. So, what essentially happens in those marriages, a person under the age of 18 cannot give consent. So, what is happening in those marriages is rape, is defilement. So, I would wish for more female lawyers to take up, constitutional challenges against legal provisions like this that make it okay, that enable the abuse of women and girls. For prosecutors, it's also very important for them to step up in the same regard as lawyers, selecting. I'm not sure how it works in the Ministry of Justice, whether it's the Director of Public Prosecution to give each prosecutor a file, or if prosecutors are responsible for selecting cases. But we need to see more cases of public interest being brought by prosecutors. What we see at the Ministry of Justice, and especially at the Director of Public Prosecutions, it seems that the Director of Public Prosecutions actually is playing the role of the Attorney General, protecting and acting on behalf of the government rather than in terms of public interest issues. So it would be great to see more like that. And in South Sudan, we haven't seen a lot of activism by judges. I'm not even sure if this is possible, but there are jurisdictions where judicial activism is possible. And we've seen it in other contexts globally where judges have come in to either advance public interest, protect human rights, or advance progress of a society. I think one key example will be recently in the Kenyan context, where Justice Maraga struck down the election results from the last election. It was seen as, judicial activism. So, where it is possible in South Sudan, it would be important to see judges. We also have a key problem where much of the activities of the judiciary are not public or are not documented or recorded. And much of these proceedings also take place are conducted in Arabic. So there is a problem already there where most of the clients that might come present themselves before the courts might not understand Arabic or might not have access to that all those files. Like, I have tried in so many cases every time I go to access certain case files and to try and understand how the judges arrived at analysis. But even being able to access certain court records in South Sudan is a very difficult process. So these are aspects to be taken into consideration when we talk about what more can be done by all these actors, lawyers, judges, and women prosecutors. But I think in general, there requires a reform of the judiciary to not only enable resources that are provided for, prosecutors, because there are good prosecutors out there. There are active judges out there. I remember last year, there's a judge in Torit who struck down, basically outlawed child marriage in Torit. And there have been judges over the years who have basically said you cannot compensate or award a family whose relative has been murdered, with a child, yeah, with the alternative of giving them a girl to marry as compensation for that homicide. So we've had times in our history where judges have stepped up, and we have seen progress here and there, but much more needs to be done. And it starts from a point of ensuring, all those reforms, and also ensuring proper resources are awarded. Once again, I apologize for all the background noise.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Nyago. That was very enlightening. Um, Maybe to redirect to Miss Ayen, um, do you think the culture of impunity in South Sudan has undermined the efforts of eliminating all kinds of violence against women? How? And kindly just elaborate more on that. Do you think training more women law enforcement can improve the system in South Sudan?
Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, you're talking about the culture of impunity, and if it's undermining, eliminating violence. Yes.
Yes.
So, from my understanding, in the country, when we established the nation after the elections, the situation was relatively calm. Economic situation was relatively calm. Judicial system was relatively calm, although there were some incidences of where there were people who were abusing their positions to undermine the legal system. But I think after 2013, the country has become out of control. I think the culture has become a violent culture after the 2013 crisis. We already have a patriarchal system in South Sudan, but because we're a country that emerged in 2000, we have been participating in workshops and participating in events all over the world, and the government was actually progressing before 2013. But after 2013, this is where we see the fragmentation of the country. You see the violence erupting all over the country, especially in the states. And you see that there's become a culture of violence and impunity. You see the proliferation of tribalism. Everything is in tribal groups. And I think these are what are undermining peace and undermining security and undermining safety. So, what I think is required now in 2020, and what is required as we are embarking on implementing the Revitalize Agreement, is to not only continue to implement the agreement um, by making sure that all the elected people are in the right positions in the regional level and on the state level, so that there's no power vacuum. But most importantly, there needs to be women representation with 35% as a minimum. And I believe that women representation will help in influencing change and reducing the culture of impunity. And what is necessary is security sector reform. For us to change the situation in the country, to eliminate the culture of violence in South Sudan, we need security sector reform. Thankfully, we have a Minister of Defense that is a woman. We need to take advantage of this situation and lobby with her. Thankfully, we have the first ever female vice president. So we are experiencing unprecedented positions that we never had before. So we need to progress further as women to make sure we involve ourselves in security sector reform all over the nation, eliminate the culture of violence and nepotism. Because the reason why there is criminal activities, why criminal activities are uncontrollable, is because of nepotism, favoritism, and this godfather syndrome, where everybody believes that if I have a godfather, then I don't have to face the law. So this is what I just thought it could be in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you so much. That was really great on the security sector reform. Now, let me just go back to this question on sexual gender-based violence. Oftentimes, during these sexual gender-based violence, when women report the case to the law enforcement, they're often told to bring evidence which might only be possible through forensic testing. Do you think that this is fair?
Um, in this question is directed to me.
Yes, it is.
Sorry, can you please repeat?
All right. I'm saying during sexual gender-based violence, when women report the case to the law enforcement, they are often told to bring evidence which might only be possible through forensic testing. Do you think this is fair for women?
Um, I'm sure that there's international standards of forensic procedures, although this is not my jurisdiction. You know, this is more of the lawyer's jurisdiction. But in terms of evidence, it's unfair to request evidence, but I think there's a certain medical test that one is supposed to undergo, and I think this is international standards. But I don't think that the way that South Sudanese treat uh, victims is fair. First of all, there's not enough women in these different, for example, there's not enough women in the hospital. Say somebody gets raped in the night, you'll never find a woman working overnight in this section of the police because women are supposed to be at home. So there's not enough women doctors, women police officers, women national security officers, women soldiers who are ever on the scene. So I think in order to create more fairness, obviously, you would need more pathologists. As Dr. Melvin had said earlier, there's only 4 pathologists in the whole country. With the crime that is happening in this country and the power vacuum all over South Sudan right now, the impunity and the violence, to have only four pathologists is preposterous. And I think even with counselors in the nation, when we look at counselors, there's only a few counselors in the nation also to deal with the results of gender-based violence. So we don't have the capacity to deal with rape and to deal with the victims. Counselors should be there, pathologists should be there, and they should be afforded the proper care. So there are international standards and ways to deal with rape, but it should be done in a fair way. But I'd just like to add that women in general are being treated badly in every situation. If they were assaulted, they get blamed. If they were raped, they get blamed. So it goes back again to the culture of patriarchy that Molana Nyagwa had talked about, that we have a whole system of misogyny and hatred towards women. And believe it or not, we have actually made some strides. Although we went backwards in 2013 because of this war that was perpetuated by tribalism, we had made some strides and we had started having the important discussions about women and their roles. And we started having women as ministers, we started having women in the government, and right now we have a vice president that's a woman, and we have a vice president that is the defense minister. But what is necessary is for us to capitalize on all these opportunities together to support one another as women and to make it benefit us. We need to advocate and to continue to move forward, because there's no point in having 35% if we cannot do anything about it. So basically, it's not fair for a person who's a victim to be required to have evidence. But the question isn't, is it fair, but what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayan. And Allow me also just to pose this question to Dr. Melvin, also being a pathologist. I think let's also hear from your perspective what actually happens in the field, in actual practice. Do you think this is a fair kind of thing for women?
Um, the normal practice or the standard practice is when a victim comes to you complaining of an assault, being of rape. You take the victim to a secure area, calm the victim, ask the victim certain questions. When did it happen? How did it happen? Then examine the victim to establish if it has really happened or not. After that, you collect the samples, use both the visible ones and the fluid samples. So the visible ones include the clothes, the dressing the victim has put on, the underwear, the socks, as in everything the victim has. You collect it as evidence. Then you swab the victim for specimens such as if there is semen, vaginal fluids, and etc. for profiling. But as I've heard or as I've read in South Sudan, this is not the standard procedure. Majority of the women who complain of rape, they don't undergo the standard procedure. So I don't think it's a fair game to women. Doctors should practice what is standard so as to protect our women and our children.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And also, as Ayan had mentioned, that we're living in unprecedented times where we have a female vice president and we have women in different positions across the board. That we hope that we'll be able to see these changes, in the time to come, and to protect our women overall. Um, Janet, if I could just go back to you as well, when you were speaking about counseling. What do you think what are the challenges facing counselors, psychologists, mental health specialists, and psychiatrists in South Sudan? And what are your recommendations for us moving forward?
Thank you. I'll say lack of proper training in handling clients' sensitivity information. We should always be confidential. And number two, we should politically instability renders some areas without mental health. Some areas may not have centers for counselors, and it is recommended that every area should have a center. And poor pay, especially counselors under government pay, hence they motivate to work. At least they should increase their pay and they will work, they'll do their best. And the recommendations setting relationship limits. We should have our guidelines with patients to ensure that the association remains strictly professional. Like example, the rule of physical contact in the office. We should not be touching people in the office. And counselors should maintain high confidentiality boosts to ensure the issue of stigma. We should always be confidential, especially for us counselors and mental health. We should ensure confidentiality, and I'll strictly talk about confidentiality because that's our work, and we are talking about human beings. We should be sensitive. That will be stigmatizing them with their issues. And community members should be made aware of the existent counseling services. We should ensure that our services are announced outside there, and people should know that we offer services, counseling services at a particular place. And as a counselor, I should also do regular counseling checks with my peer. I should go also for mental fit. We are also human beings. We should also be detected for mental abnormality. And I also will talk to the I'll talk about the government. They should institute a regular. They should institute a counseling body with counseling authority, and I hope it will reach to the government. And we should have a counseling center somewhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Janet. Um, Ayan, let me go back to you. Do you have any, what are your recommendations after like our debate, your recommendation and also what we're going to do moving forward in your area?
Sorry, can I just clarify recommendations on what exactly?
Okay, on just in the area of human rights, yeah. What do you think? What are your challenges that you're facing currently in that area? And then, are there any proposals in terms of recommendations on what needs to happen going forward? And then, any parting remarks as well?
Okay. General,
Yes.
please. Um, I think to continue with such forums, uh, such a forum where you have lawyers and counselors and doctors is it's a very necessary forum where you bring people together. People exchange knowledge with the different specializations that they have, and they can see how they can work together. I think, like for example, myself, I've come out of this forum more knowledgeable now, and I know who I can go to, where to go if I want to talk about pathology or advocate on issues to do with that, or counseling. So, advocacy forums, but the main thing is for us to participate in the 35% as a minimum. We all must be involved in the government. We must be involved in this nation. We must lobby our own networks because, as Molana was saying, we are more privileged, we have more exposure, and we have more, maybe, social capital than most of the people in the grassroots. So we actually act as a watchdog, and we act as people who are safeguarding the rights of vulnerable people on ground. So we need to continue to protect these women by speaking out, engaging them, being there for them, and making sure we use our networks to influence the situation in the country. So basically, advocacy, participation in the government is what I think is necessary.
Thank you very much, Ayan. And we'll take those words to heart. And hopefully they will invoke the kind of discussion and conversation that we hope would be, after this discussion, after this debate. Dr. Melvin, sorry about that. Dr. Melvin, you told us a bit of the challenges that you're facing in the field of pathology and crime scene investigation. Perhaps maybe you can just give us some parting words and also just some recommendation from your perspective in moving forward.
Um, For the general public, once you witness a crime, please report it to the police and to the appropriate people. Don't interfere with the investigations because it might prolong the result. And also to the public, please join our field. In South Sudan, we are only 4, and we really need more. It's a beautiful fact field, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And I want to thank all the ladies for joining us. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really educated on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Melvin. And indeed, the area of pathology sounds like it's quite interesting. And I hope that there's some both women, young girls, and some young boys who are very interested in the field after your discussion. So I hope that you get some few calls after this. So Nyagor, I know we spoke about human rights in general. And I thought that maybe I could, as you give us your parting words and also just your recommendations at the end of the day, perhaps you could want to give, you could give our viewers just an idea of what the Penal Code of South Sudan is and just what acts of sexual violence and gender-based violences are defined within it. So if you're able to just encompass that in your response, that'll be really great because I feel like it's quite important. This is all about rights and the laws. So maybe give our audience a little bit of perspective in that area. Thanks.
Right. I mean, the penal code in South Sudan is basically the legislation that spells out crimes and offenses in South Sudan. So it will spell out and define what a certain crime is, and it will also spell out the punishment for that crime. So, with regard, crimes that relate to women include. So the penal code spells out the crime of rape, which is basically intercourse without the consent of the individual, and so it doesn't. Rape is not defined as towards women. So the penal code is very general, such that it can be rape towards men as well. So it also defines assault, which is a general charge, and this battery charge is one that is invoked in cases of domestic violence and battery. There's assaults without provocation. There's the crime of acts of gross indecency. It also spells out acts of incest. It also outlaws the crime of female genital mutilation, among so many others. So the penal code is accessible. I think you can easily get a version of it online. It hasn't been reformed in quite some time, so you will be able to access the penal code. Um, yeah. So with regard to my parting shots or my last words. I mean, first of all, thank you for those who organized this forum. I had only heard about it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very pleased that South Sudanese women have a platform where they can show their expertise and their knowledge to the extent on equal basis with their male counterparts, or even at greater basis, ladies. So I highly encourage everybody, and I commend everybody who has been engaged and has been participating in the various talks that we've had. With regard to going forward, I will say we have made great strides as women in South Sudan, women and girls in South Sudan. We have made huge strides against so many odds. I admire so many activists and so many lawyers who go out there every day, risking their own security and safety and their own reputation to be able to advance the needs and rights of women. So, but we do have a longer way to go. We often invoke 35% as our winning ticket, but really it isn't. It is just one tool in our path. And 35% is supposed to be a mitigation, so there is 65%. So it is not impossible that women can have that 65% representation in governance. It is just because there is a misunderstanding of what 35% is. That quarter, it doesn't mean that as soon as you have a 35% quota at every level of governance, then you have done your job. No, we can have 100% representation of women, and that is not a problem. And I think we have to work towards that, breaking that stereotype of, oh, hey, we've given you your 35%. So that isn't enough. With regard to all the issues that we have discussed today, so one, there has to be accountability at all fronts, justice at all fronts. We've focused a lot on assaults and rape and other crimes, but then there are economic, social, cultural crimes that happen against women. The economic disenfranchisement of women with regard to matrimonial property. This is a huge, huge deal that we need to, shed better attention on. I know we've had a land policy that has been in development since 2012. This is an opportunity for women to engage with the land policy, to engage in other areas of policy and legislation to ensure that these are progressive legislations. So, in the interest of time, I think I will. and we also have to better advocate for our own issues as women. We need to step down from these pedestals that we have, and I may have a law degree, but as long as other girls in South Sudan do not have that equal access to opportunity, then there is a problem. And we have to continuously work towards, breaking down those barriers that all of us, at different levels are experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyagoa. And thank you so much for elaborating that very clearly. So as we come to the end of our conversation, and I think we'll just be cutting up really soon, there's actually a question that I had for Pony, but she ended up dropping off. And I think that for this particular topic, I would like to just ask Ayen, just real quick. So what can you say, just on the journalist front, what can you say about the inappropriate graphic pictures that people post, which might tamper with the evidence of crime and even traumatize the public and the family? A good example will be on the graphic images that were circulated with the 3 murdered children, as well as the images of Kirbino. Has the social media contributed to this? What advice, quickly, can you give the people watching up today regarding this particular issue? Thanks.
So this is a great point that you made. In terms of the media itself, the media has a responsibility, and there are some ethics that should be followed. And it seems that the ethics were not followed by some of the media. Pictures were shown, graphic pictures were posted, and most of the people were the media, people who were journalists. Some of them posted even the alleged killer. And yeah, this is not professional, but it seems that the unprofessionalism is not only the media, but also the police, the people who were at the crime scene who took the pictures. They were the ones who exposed these pictures. It could have been police. It could have been any person who was there on the scene. But I believe that we have a general lack of professionalism in South Sudan in all of our fields. We have a lack of confidentiality in our fields, and we also have a lack of ethics in general in South Sudan. So as you see, it's not just the media, it's not just the police. There's a kind of breakdown in ethics in South Sudan, as you may see. Even the way that social media is going right now, the conversations that are had, even the abusive discussions that we see online. But I personally think that regardless of what has happened with all these photos, I believe that these photos, although it's unethical and it was wrong and traumatizing, I believe that they cause an outcry of where the presidency had to intervene and to find the killer in the end. So although it was unprofessional and it was wrong, at the end of the day, it's very hard to control people on the social media. People were advised not to circulate these photos of Carbino and of the children, but it's very hard to control people. And as you know, we are in a transition. Our people are in a transition. We have some people coming from the village. They're going from from the rural area to urbanization. Some people are then they don't know how to react to the media and to social media. We also have people from the diaspora. We have different cultures. So I think these contribute to these factors. And let me just conclude with that statement.
All right. Thank you so much, Ayan. I thought that was quite critical just to hear about it. And basically what we're hearing is it's all about ethics, both from the journalists, police, but also on individuals who are resharing these pictures. So at this point, I'd like to thank you all ladies for joining us, taking the time out to be on the call, and to everyone who logged in from anywhere. I'd also like to thank the UN Women who allowed us to use their internet just so we can have a stable call. So ladies, I'd like to thank you all very much. And to anyone who's watching, if there's any questions, just send it to us and we'd be able to answer it at some point. Yeah. So thank you very much.